He thought I was finished when he cast me out, replaced me with his mistress. What he didn't know was that my family's collapse was a calculated silence. I left without a fight, watched from the shadows, and when the truth resurfaced, I didn't seek revenge. I offered him a rope and he built his own noose. Now I live by the sea, running a quiet refuge for women like me. No headlines, no handouts, just healing. I wasn't broken. I was rehearsing my return. I'm no longer a supporting role in someone else's empire. I am the story now. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories of personal growth and empowerment. The night my husband told me to leave, he didn't raise his voice. He just raised the glass he was drinking from and said, "It's better for both of us this way." You'd expect betrayal to be loud, a slam, a sob, a slammed door maybe. But it wasn't. Not with him, not with us. It was just the soft clink of ice in a glass, the TV flickering without sound, and his eyes fixed on the ticker at the bottom of the screen. Hartman Capital collapses. The kind of headline people read once and repeat forever, like they know what it means. I watched him more than I listened. I watched how easily he let the silence do the talking, how naturally he took a sip, like he'd been rehearsing this goodbye longer than I knew. I waited to feel something: panic, pain, even fury. But there was only stillness, because the truth was, the ending had already happened. We just hadn't said it out loud yet. I thought about all the times we'd smiled at dinner parties, all the small gestures that looked like love from a distance but felt like nothing up close. We hadn't been a marriage for months. We'd just been pretending, keeping up appearances not for the world, not even for each other, but for the echo in the room that might shatter if we stopped pretending. And now the pretending had stopped. The day before, my father had called with that dry voice he uses when things are going exactly to plan. "We're freezing everything," he said. "Let the vultures circle. Let them think we're bleeding." It wasn't collapse. It was calculation. I could have told Julian. I didn't. I needed to know who he really was when he thought I had nothing left. Turns out, he was exactly who I feared. So I packed, quietly, just the essentials. I left the wedding ring on the counter beside a half-burned candle, the scent of something sweet and artificial still clinging to the air. I walked past him without a word. He didn't turn his head, didn't ask me to stay, not even a reflex flinch. At the door, I caught my reflection in the glass. I didn't look like a woman abandoned. I looked like someone who had just finished watching the final scene of a long, empty play. The cold bit at my feet the moment I stepped outside. The street was damp, the sky colorless. But I didn't stop walking. I wasn't leaving my marriage. He had already let it go a long time ago. I didn't ask where he spent the nights after I left. I didn't have to. Vivienne Dane always had a way of waiting just off stage, as if she knew the moment I'd step out of the light. The first time I heard her name, it came wrapped in a half-laugh at a fundraiser. Someone leaned in a little too close and said, "You're so gracious." I don't know if I could stomach my husband working that closely with someone like her. I smiled. That was my job then, to smile through warning signs. She was lean, sharp, always dressed like she might be photographed even when she wasn't. A PR strategist with surgically precise charm. She once told me, during a dinner party Julian insisted on throwing, that she admired my restraint. "If I were you," she said, swirling her wine, "I'd be screaming." I didn't scream. Not when I found her bracelet under the back seat of Julian's car. Not when she texted him after midnight and he said, "It's just work. Don't make it a thing." Not even when I watched her touch his arm too long at a conference we hosted together. I told myself that trust meant more than suspicion, that love meant letting things go. But now I understand what I called grace was really self-abandonment, and what I called strength was silence. I wrapped around my own voice until it stopped asking to be heard. I used to think loving him meant trusting him. That love, if it was real, would hold its shape even when you couldn't quite feel it. But love without truth is just performance. And I had been performing for far too long. So, no, I didn't feel shock when I saw the photo online. Just 4 days after I left Julian and Vivian at some hotel bar in Miami, smiling like they'd never missed a beat, I recognized the look in his eyes. I'd seen it before when he looked at himself in the mirror after closing a deal. She didn't steal him. He was never mine to lose. And I was done begging silence to become safety. The first headline hit like a pebble on glass, quick, sharp, almost laughable. Hartman Capital freezes global holdings amid financial chaos. Then came the second, then the 100th. Within a week, I was trending on business news sites, gossip blogs, Reddit threads. Some asked where I'd disappeared to. Most didn't care. They just wanted a story. A fall from grace is always more delicious than grace itself. They said I must have known, that I had insider access, that I should be investigated. The same people who used to call me a role model now called me a liability. I watched as the air around my name changed temperature. What once warmed rooms now drew suspicion. Old friends forgot how to say hello. Invitations dried up overnight. One afternoon, a woman I'd known for years. Someone I'd shared charity tables and champagne toasts with passed me on the street in Cambridge. She looked me in the eye, paused just long enough for discomfort to set in, then turned away as if I were contagious. Not fallen, toxic. Julian released a statement to the press. Not about me, about himself. While I have deep respect for the Hartman family, I want to make it clear that my business decisions and future vision are my own. There was no name attached to the distancing, just enough plausible deniability to let the crowd do the rest. I read the statement once, then slid my phone into a drawer I wouldn't open again for weeks. It was strange, watching the world fall into frenzy over a story I already knew was false. Stranger still, how peaceful it felt to be nowhere near it. Some mornings, I walked to the edge of the harbor, coffee in hand, and listened to the water slap gently against the dock. I didn't check headlines. I didn't call anyone back. I let the narrative build itself like a storm over someone else's house. For years, I had worn grace like a tailored coat, elegant, expected, a little too tight across the chest. When it finally slipped from my shoulders, no one noticed. But I could breathe again. I didn't need to prove anything. Let them talk. Let them write the ending they wanted, because I already knew mine wasn't ending. It was rewinding quietly, precisely preparing for something no headline could see coming. It was a photo, not from a tabloid or a gossip blog, those had stopped caring weeks ago, but from an architecture feature about sustainable renovations in old homes. I almost didn't click on it. Almost. But there it was, the hallway, the light, the curve of the staircase I used to run my fingers along when I was buying myself time to smile before greeting guests. The kitchen island I'd stood behind the night he first told me my laugh carried too far during dinners. The rug, God, the rug. I'd agonized over for days because I wanted something soft enough for bare feet, but rich enough to impress his colleagues. And her. She wasn't named, just part of the setting, like a model in a catalog. Legs crossed, drink in hand, face turned slightly away from the camera. But I didn't need to see her full profile. I knew that posture. I'd perfected it. Vivian had always known how to slip into a room like she'd been there the whole time. She looked natural. I waited for the sting. For the hot wave of jealousy or rage or whatever women are supposed to feel when their replacement appears fully at home in the life they've just stepped out of. But nothing came. Just a slow exhale I hadn't realized I'd been holding. A quiet kind of knowing. She fit. Not because she was better or more beautiful or more loved, but because the space itself had never bent for me. I had always been adjusting, shrinking, tucking pieces of myself into corners so his world could remain intact. It wasn't that he'd traded me out. He'd just swapped the actress, kept the stage, and prayed the audience wouldn't notice. And maybe they wouldn't, but I did. And I didn't envy her. She played her part well. But the script wasn't mine anymore, and I was no longer in the audience. The house I rented sat at the edge of a half-forgotten town where the ocean didn't glitter, it growled. Wind-torn, gray-skied, and stubborn. It suited me. No doorman, no imported marble, no pressed linens or catered mornings. Just creaking wood, salt air, and a silence that didn't ask me to smile. No one here cared about who I had been, or who I had been married to. At the cafe down the street, they called me ma'am or hun, depending on the mood. At the bookstore, the clerk recommended secondhand poetry collections and never asked where I was from. I told them my name was Sylvia and left it at that. Most days I walked, not to go anywhere, but to let the cold bite through my coat, to feel the wet weight of sea mist in my hair. There's a kind of honesty in weather that doesn't soften itself for you. It reminded me what was real, what wasn't required to be palatable. The floors in the house creaked under my steps, sharp and unfiltered. Sometimes I paused just to hear it, the sound of myself moving through space without needing to make room for anyone else. I'd forgotten how loud my footsteps could be on old floorboards. As if the house was reminding me, you're here and that's enough. I cooked my own food. I brewed coffee the old way, by hand, slow and careful. I read aloud sometimes, just to hear my own voice fill a space without waiting for permission. I wrote notes on napkins, in the margins of books, on receipts, fragments of thought that didn't need to become anything. One morning, I burned my toast and laughed, really laughed at how bad it smelled. The sound startled me. It cracked the stillness like something alive. I hadn't heard it in weeks, but there it was, mine, uninvited and completely allowed. There was no plan, just air and breath and a quiet rhythm that belonged to no one but me. This wasn't a collapse. It was a shedding. And if it looked like nothing from the outside, that was fine. I had spent too long performing shape. Now I wanted to remember what it felt like to be formless and still whole. It had been 9 months. Long enough for the headlines to shift focus. Long enough for people to forget what they thought they knew. But apparently, not long enough for him to recover. The first clue came from a business segment I caught accidentally at the cafe, the kind that plays on mute while the weather scrolls below. Julian's name flashed across the ticker, followed by phrases like influence decline, investor mistrust, image fatigue. I didn't flinch. I stirred my coffee and looked away. 3 days later, he showed up. He didn't knock. He walked in like the wind might have left the door open, like he still had the right to enter places he'd once exited with silence. I was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, holding a mug that still felt too warm to set down. For a moment, I thought I was imagining him, the shape of him in my doorway. Expensive coat, no umbrella, the same smirk he wore when making decisions that only benefited himself. Julian Hartman, in the flesh. And not even slightly out of breath. "I heard you were here," he said, as if I'd been hiding for sport. I didn't answer. I didn't invite him to sit. The house did what the house does. It settled in its quiet and let him stand there, out of place. He looked around, took in the mismatched chairs, the peeling windowsill, the stack of library books beside the couch. "This is different," he said. "Very rustic, very—" He let the word die. Probably couldn't find one that didn't mean beneath him. Then came the real reason. "The media's eating me alive," he said. "Your name's still attached to mine in too many places. If we were seen together again, even briefly, it could stabilize things. Remind people we're aligned, that we still share values." Values. He said it like a currency, not a single apology, not even a pretend one. I took a sip of coffee, slow enough for the heat to bite. I let him stand there, framed in the doorway like a portrait hung wrong. Expensive, but irrelevant. He moved closer, softened his voice, like he remembered something tender between us. I never stopped caring, you're still part of my story. I smiled, just a little. And that was enough for him to believe he still had access. That was his mistake, because I wasn't angry. I wasn't moved. I was documenting. He came back the next day. No flowers, no script, just a paper cup of coffee I didn't ask for and a face rehearsed to look unrehearsed. I knew you'd think it through, he said, setting the cup down between us like a peace offering. It was the wrong roast. He didn't know that. Or maybe he did, and thought the gesture would cover the gap. I let the silence settle between us before sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. His eyebrows lifted. You already drafted something? I nodded. He didn't reach for it right away. He studied me first, like he was trying to catch some flicker of old softness in my eyes before letting the page speak. The title was printed cleanly at the top. Public Image Alignment. Agreement of Terms. He smiled, polite but wary. That's very corporate. It's not personal, I said. You wanted a solution. This is one. He skimmed it the way men like him skim everything fast, confident, as if anything that could hurt them would come bolded, but the sharpest lines never need to raise their voice. His gaze paused near the end, a section tucked neatly into the body of the text. Unhighlighted, undramatic, entirely deliberate. He pointed to it without looking up. This paragraph here about private context being used to shape public perception, what does that mean? It means, I said, steady, that if either of us tries to weaponize what was private memories, proximity, implication for media gain, the agreement nullifies itself, and everything that follows becomes open terrain. He looked back at the page, but this time slower. You're saying if I spin the story wrong, you'll go nuclear? I didn't answer right away, just reached for my cup, let the heat press into my palms, let him sit with his own question. Then, no, I'm saying if you spin it at all, you won't be the one writing the ending. His jaw shifted. He didn't like that sentence. It didn't sound like me, not the version he'd filed away. You're serious. I am, I said. And so are you. That's why you're here. He didn't deny it. He didn't agree either, just folded the page in half and placed it back on the table like he was tucking away a deal, not realizing it was a line. He opened his mouth, maybe to ask for a change, maybe to backpedal. I didn't let him. If you don't want it, don't sign it, I said, soft but flat. But if you do understand this, you're not walking into a partnership. You're walking into memory. And I never forget the fine print. He blinked once, then signed. I couldn't tell you exactly when Vivian disappeared. One day, she was simply no longer beside Julian. No statement, no scandal, no digital erasure, just absence so smooth it felt orchestrated. Her face stopped appearing in the carefully staged photos. She was no longer 3 steps behind him at events. People whispered about her taking time for herself, but I knew better. Time off is the kindest phrase we give women who've been quietly cut from scripts they didn't write. Julian never mentioned her. Not once. Not in public, not in passing. As if she had been nothing more than a working title. And that silence told me everything. Around the same time, my name reappeared this time in a context he hadn't scripted. A short segment on a financial network ran quietly one afternoon. Hartman Holdings regains ground after strategic reinvestment. Beneficiary of trust. Sylvia Hartman, sole heir. Just a few lines. But in Julian's world, a few lines are all it takes to shift gravity. I did nothing. I showed up. That was enough. He began to place me beside him in frames, at first subtly, then not. A hand on my back during a fundraiser. A joint appearance at an art gala. Press releases laced with phrases like rebuilding trust and realigning purpose. He used we like a shield, as if invoking proximity could rewrite what had broken. I didn't nod. I didn't pull away. I let it unfold like watching a man set his own stage and not realize the floor was hollow. Then came the tremor. It started as an anonymous blog post, dissecting timelines and boardroom movements. A quiet inquiry from a minor analyst with a sharp memory and sharper instinct. Then, an internal email leaked, one that revealed how appearances were being curated to influence stakeholder decisions. The language wasn't inflammatory. It was precise, surgical. And I recognized the voice. Not literally, but I knew who had lit the match. Vivian. Not for vengeance, but to return the truth to where it belonged. Julian called me. His voice, once so precise, was frayed, like a thread unraveling under too much weight. Are you behind this? No. Are you going to stop it? No. I didn't lie. I hadn't engineered the fall. I had simply stopped holding it up. He spiraled quickly after that. Phrases he'd offered to the press were now turned back on him. Investors questioned alignment. Images once meant to signal unity now looked staged, desperate. The same hand he'd placed on my back became evidence. The same we became a point of legal ambiguity. I watched it happen. I didn't flinch, didn't feed it. I let it breathe. The last time I saw him, we were in the same room, but not together. A benefit dinner, low music, polished laughter. He stood alone, framed in light, still trying to smile like it was all part of the plan. But his eyes had stopped playing along. He looked like a man posing for a picture no one was taking anymore. I left before dessert. No one stopped me. No one called out. And I liked that. I didn't destroy him. I didn't even touch the pieces. I just let him carry the weight of everything he thought I wouldn't remember. And eventually, it sank him. One day, I don't remember. It started with coffee. Not charity, not a mission, just a warm paper cup handed to a woman outside the post office. Her eyes tired, one hand on a stroller with a crooked wheel, the other clenching nothing. She didn't thank me. She didn't have to. I wasn't offering kindness. I was recognizing a version of myself, from a life I had already left behind. After that, it kept happening. I didn't set out to build anything. I just stayed, listened, noticed. There were women in town, quiet women, stretched thin and barely visible. Some had left worse behind. Some were still in it. Most had stopped trying to explain. I didn't offer advice. I offered space. A seat on the porch, a folded bill slipped into a coat pocket. A ride, a number, a name to call that wasn't mine. Eventually, the word traveled. Not loudly, just enough. Someone would whisper, "She helps but doesn't ask questions." And I wouldn't correct them. The money was there, my inheritance, once tied up in family trusts, now loosened and repurposed. Not to build anything grand, just to remove what gets in the way. We started calling it the porch. There was no sign, just a place to sit. A door that opened without forms or explanations. We covered first rents, replaced locks, paid for prescriptions, for shoes that fit, for a bus ride away from someone who wouldn't let go. No speeches, no website, only quiet logistics, passed between hands like breath. I never remarried. I never wanted to. Not because I stopped believing in love, but because I stopped needing to be tethered to be whole. Some people reclaim themselves by being seen. I did it by seeing others, clearly, quietly, without flinching. The women who found their way here didn't know my story. They didn't need to. What mattered was that when they arrived, nervous, half-believing, there was already a light on, a chair waiting, and someone who didn't ask for their history before offering shelter. I didn't rescue them. I simply made a space where they didn't have to fall apart to be believed. And sometimes, on slow afternoons, when the house is quiet and the tea's gone cold, I think about him. Not with anger, not with longing. Just the way you'd remember a road you once took and no longer need to walk again. He was part of the story, but he isn't the ending. And that, to me, is what freedom finally felt like. Not loud, not celebrated, just real. And mine. I've been the woman who was left, the woman who stayed, the woman who said nothing, and the one who finally walked away. I've worn silence like armor, then shed it like skin. I've mistaken performance for partnership and trust for convenience. I've lost things that looked like love and found things that felt like peace. And now I'm simply here, not better, not bitter, just whole in a way that doesn't ask to be seen, only lived. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.